Black man, stopped by cops outside his own home 10 minutes. Later, he showed his FBI badge. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Step away. This isn't your place. The shout cracked through the night like a baton hitting steel. Red and blue sirens splashed against glass walls of the Atlas Financial Tower. 3 officers surged forward, one clutching cuffs, another pointing a rigid finger, the older one barking orders loud enough for the crowd across the street to hear. And in the center of it all stood him, a black man in a beige trench coat, jaw set, hand loose at his side. No panic, no flinch, just presence. The kind of stillness that makes noise look desperate. Phones were already raised. Dozens of bystanders pressed against the barricades, screens glowing, recording every frame. Their whispers carried across the plaza. He looks calm. Why are they yelling? Wait, doesn't he live here? But the officers didn't listen. One yanked his cuffs higher, metal glinting under streetlights. Another tightened his stance, eyes scanning like a hunter circling prey. The lead officer, gray hair, uniform lighter than the rest, leaned forward, voice cutting. You don't belong here. ID, now. He didn't move. The man's silence wasn't weakness, it was weight. He'd heard this tone before, in other streets, other cities. A script rehearsed so many times it played like muscle memory. Suspicion first, proof later. Always suspicion first. The air thickened. A woman near the barricade muttered, "This doesn't feel right." A young man lifted his phone higher, catching the reflection of patrol lights bleeding across marble columns. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to him. One officer stepped closer, snatching the keys from his hand. The crowd gasped. Another pressed forward, cuffs rattling like chains about to close. But still, the man stayed anchored, as if the pavement itself held him firm. His eyes didn't waver. His shoulders didn't fold. The lead officer sneered. "Trespassing. You're under arrest." The words echoed across the plaza. Heavy, final. And yet the man didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. He simply looked at the cuffs, then back at the officer. Calm, unbroken. Silent enough that the whole crowd leaned forward, waiting for what would come next. The cuffs dangled in the air like a threat waiting to close. Metal catching light. Silence pressing heavy. "Hands behind your back," the younger officer snapped, stepping forward with the certainty of someone convinced he owned the ground beneath them. His partner's eyes narrowed, already framing the man as a suspect, not a citizen. But the black man didn't move. His shoulders squared, his breath steady. He could feel the weight of the crowd now, dozens of eyes, dozens of lenses watching not just him but the way justice tilted in plain sight. From behind the barricade, a teenager muttered, "Why are they cuffing him? He's just standing there." Another voice followed, louder this time. "He's not resisting. Why are you escalating?" Phones angled higher, red dots blinking, live stream comments pouring across unseen screens. The older officer raised his chin. His voice was sharp, rehearsed. "You don't live here. You don't belong here. We had a report of trespassing, and you fit the description." The man's eyes flicked once toward the building's glass facade. His reflection stared back, calm, composed, exactly as he intended. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He let the accusation hang in the air, raw and undeniable. Another officer shifted, impatience dripping from every word. "Show ID, or you're coming with us. Last chance." He jabbed the air with his free hand, the cuffs rattling with every syllable. The man's silence deepened. It wasn't weakness, it was defiance without noise. Each second he stood still stretched the tension tighter. The crowd leaned forward as though a verdict was about to drop. From the edge of the barricade, a woman's voice cut through. "I know him. He lives here. I've seen him every morning." A ripple of murmurs followed, some nodding, others recording even faster, but the officers ignored it. They only saw what they'd already decided to see. The lead officer snapped back, louder, angrier. Ma'am, stay out of this. We're handling it. His hand gestured sharply, a signal for backup already circling near the patrol car. The black man lowered his gaze briefly, not in surrender but in calculation. His fingers brushed the edge of his coat pocket where his phone rested. One quiet call could change everything, but not yet. Timing mattered. Another step, another command. The cuffs lifted again. The crowd's murmur turned into shouts. He's not trespassing. Why are you arresting him? Check your facts. But the officers pushed forward, blind to the storm gathering around them. And still he remained silent, anchored, waiting, because he knew the next move would not be theirs. It would be his. The moment broke when the younger officer lunged forward. His hand clamped down on the man's wrist, metal cuffs scraping against skin. Gasps tore through the crowd. "Stop resisting," the officer barked, though the man hadn't moved an inch. His body was still calm, as though rooted to the pavement. The only motion came from the officer himself, pulling, twisting, manufacturing a struggle where none existed. A chorus of voices rose from behind the barricade. "He's not resisting. Why are you lying? Let him go." Phones zoomed closer, flashes strobing against the patrol car's hood. The night was no longer quiet, it was charged, every breath a spark. The older officer stepped in, jaw tight, voice like a gavel. "You're under arrest. Trespassing. Possible burglary attempt." His words carried across the plaza, written into the phones of every witness. The black man lifted his eyes, steady and deliberate. He didn't yank his arm back. He didn't shout. Instead, he let the accusation hang, heavy and unjust, until silence returned. Then, slowly, he spoke for the first time. "You're making a mistake." The officer holding him scoffed. "We'll see about that." He jerked the cuffs higher, the metal clinking like chains in a hollow hall. From the crowd, a voice rang out clear, young, shaking with conviction. "I live here too. He's my neighbor. That's his house." The claim rippled, confirmation from the edges, nods spreading like sparks catching dry wood. But the officers didn't release their grip. They doubled down, determined to stamp authority over truth. The man's free hand slipped calmly into his coat pocket. He pulled out his phone, not fast, not sudden, but deliberate. He tapped once, screen lighting up in the darkness. "Protocol 1, he said quietly, almost under his breath. Somewhere, miles away, systems stirred awake. The officer frowned. "What was that?" The man's gaze didn't waver. "You'll find out." The crowd leaned in, sensing a shift, their whispers turning into a collective hum. One teenager whispered into his livestream mic, "Something's happening. He just said, 'Protocol?'" The sirens still spun red and blue across the plaza, but in that moment, the balance shifted. For the first time, the officers looked unsettled. The cuffs were still open, but the certainty behind them began to crack, and the man, calm, unbroken, stood taller, as if the storm was no longer closing in on him, but on them. The cuffs clattered once more, the officer tightening his grip as if force could fill the cracks in his authority. "You think you're clever, huh?" he sneered. "Standing out here like you belong. You people always find a way to bend the rules." The phrase "you people" hung in the air like poison. The crowd erupted instantly. Did he just say that? Oh no, not again. That's racist as hell. Phones shot higher. Red recording lights dotted the plaza like angry stars. The man stayed still, jaw firm, eyes fixed on the officers. He didn't blink. He didn't bite. He let the words slice through, then fall flat against silence, heavier than any comeback. The older officer tried to regain control, voice booming. "Suspect is non-compliant. Prepare transport." He reached for the radio at his shoulder, but before he could finish, a woman near the barricade shouted, "He lives here. That's his name on the mailbox." The crowd roared agreement. Shouts overlapped, filling the plaza with one collective protest. "Let him go." But the officers didn't back down. The younger one spat the words like they were fact. "You don't look like you could afford this place. Not dressed like that." More gasps, more outrage. The man's silence was no longer just composure, it was indictment. He stood there like a mirror, forcing their words back on them, exposing every bias under the glare of phone cameras. His phone buzzed softly in his pocket. A vibration no one else noticed. A signal returned. Protocol confirmed. He raised his free hand slowly, not in surrender, but in control. His voice cut through the chaos, calm, sharp, unshakable. "You're escalating a crime scene of your own making." The officer holding the cuffs scoffed. "What crime?" You're the suspect here. The man's gaze hardened. Not for long. The words stilled the air. Even the crowd felt it. Something was about to break, and not in the way the officers thought. Another phone in the audience caught the moment, a still figure surrounded by chaos, silent until silence itself became a weapon. And then, without raising his voice, without pulling against the cuffs, he spoke again. You've got 30 seconds to correct yourselves. The crowd gasped. The officers froze. For the first time, it wasn't clear who held the power in that plaza. The officer yanked hard, twisting the man's wrist behind his back. The cuffs snapped open with a metallic click, ready to close. Gasps tore through the crowd. "Don't fight me," the officer barked. His tone was harsh, almost desperate, because everyone watching could see there was no fight at all. The man hadn't budged. He stood like stone. It was the officer who shook. From the barricade, a chorus rose. "He's not resisting. Stop lying. This is abuse." The older officer pressed his radio to his mouth. "Dispatch, we've got a hostile subject. Request immediate backup." His voice cracked, betraying the first sliver of doubt, and then it came words heavy enough to cut through every siren. "You don't belong here." The younger officer spat them out, loud, certain, meant to humiliate. "A house like this? Not for people like you. Save the act for someone who buys it." The crowd erupted, shouts mixed with curses, outrage spilling over the barricades. Phones caught every syllable, streaming live, tens of thousands of eyes watching in real time. The man's jaw tightened. His silence broke, but not in anger. His voice was low, steady, sharpened by patience. "That was your last mistake." The officer laughed bitterly. "Oh, yeah? And what are you gonna do? Tweet about it?" He jerked the cuffs higher, trying to force the man down. But the man didn't bend. He didn't yield. He let the weight of that silence stretch until even the crowd stopped shouting. Then, slowly, he shifted his shoulders, his free hand sliding into the inside pocket of his coat. The officer tensed. "Hey, don't reach." But it was too late. The movement was calm, deliberate, a flash of leather, the glint of gold. The man raised a black wallet, snapped it open with one motion, and held it high for every camera, every officer, every bystander to see. The badge caught the floodlights, bold, undeniable, gleaming like a verdict. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Gasps became roars. Phones shook as people tried to zoom in, catching the seal, the lettering, the authority too heavy to ignore. The officer holding the cuffs froze, his grip faltering, his eyes widening as the reality sank in. The other two officers went still, color draining from their faces. And the man spoke again, louder this time, his voice cutting through the chaos with the force of a gavel. "You just tried to arrest a federal agent on his own doorstep." The plaza erupted. Gasps turned into shouts, shouts into chants. The red and blue wash of the sirens now lit up not just 3 officers, but 3 men exposed. "Did you see that? He's FBI. Zoom in, that's the badge." Streams exploded across phones. In seconds, the hashtag had already caught fire. Number FBI in handcuffs. Thousands of viewers poured into the comments. "This is insane." Racism caught live. "They cuffed a federal agent." The officer clutching the cuffs staggered back as though burned. His hands shook, still half raised, the metal links rattling useless in the night air. His partner's face drained white, lips parted, searching for a defense that would not come. The older officer froze mid-command, radio still pressed to his shoulder, silence pouring through instead of orders. And in the center, the man stood taller. His badge gleamed under every light, held steady for every lens. He turned slowly, letting each bystander, each witness, each recording capture the seal that made every word undeniable. His voice carried now measured, firm, official. Witnesses present, multiple recordings live. This incident is logged. The crowd cheered, not because the words were loud, but because they were law. The officer with the cuffs stammered. We had a report." The man cut him off. "A report doesn't give you the right to fabricate resistance, or to profile." His tone was sharper now, but still contained, like a blade sheathed in authority. The younger officer tried again. "We didn't know who you were." "And that's the point," the man said, his eyes narrowing. "You thought you knew enough. You thought black skin on a doorstep meant suspect." The silence that followed was heavier than the sirens. Even the radios seemed to hold their breath. From the barricade, a voice shouted, "Tell them, agent!" Another echoed, "Justice! Right here!" The chant grew, rolling over the plaza. "Justice! Justice! Justice!" The man lowered his badge just slightly, but not out of sight. His other hand raised his phone to his ear. "This is Agent Carter," he said into the receiver. "I'm reporting an active misconduct incident by local law enforcement. Initiate internal review. Send liaisons now." A crisp voice answered through the speaker. "Confirmed, Agent. Protocol engaged." The crowd erupted again, phones shaking as cheers filled the night. The officers? They didn't move. Their world had shifted in seconds from authority to exposure, from accuser to accused. And the man? He stood like a verdict delivered in real time. The plaza was no longer theirs. 3 uniforms stood exposed, their authority bleeding out under the flash of phone cameras. The officer with the cuffs spoke first, his voice trembling. "Look, we thought he was trespassing. We had a call. We were just following procedure." The words sounded thin, fragile, broken against the roar of the crowd. "Procedure?" someone shouted. "Since when does procedure mean lying?" Another fired back. "You planted a crime where there was none." The younger officer tried next, grasping for dignity. "We asked for ID. He didn't comply." "Oh." Dozens of voices rose at once. "He wasn't resisting. You grabbed him before he spoke. We all saw it." The live streams caught everything, the excuses, the crowd's fury, the panic etched across 3 faces now cornered by truth. Agent Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His badge did the heavy lifting. His tone was steady, judicial. "Every second of this is on record," he said, glancing from one officer to the next. "Your words, your actions, your bias." The older officer cleared his throat, desperate to reassert control. "We didn't know you were FBI." Carter's gaze locked on him, sharp enough to cut. "You didn't need to know that. You only needed to know I was a man on his own doorstep." The line hit like a verdict. Phones tilted closer, recording every syllable. The officers shuffled uneasily. One lowered his eyes. Another clenched his jaw. Silent now, the fight drained from his posture. From the crowd, a woman shouted, "Apologize to him." The chant caught fire. "Apologize! Apologize!" Dozens of voices, then hundreds, echoing across the plaza until the air itself demanded accountability. The older officer opened his mouth, but Carter cut across him. "Save it. You'll give your statement to Internal Affairs." He raised his phone again. "This is Agent Carter. Confirm liaison en route." The reply came swift, clinical, inescapable. "ETA 5 minutes. Misconduct unit alerted." The crowd roared approval. Some clapped, others whistled, the chant shifting now. "Justice! Justice!" The 3 officers? They stood frozen, trapped in a moment they couldn't control, their authority stripped by the very cameras they once counted on to silence others. And Agent Carter, calm, centered, resolute, remained the only figure anchored in the storm. The plaza pulsed with one sound, "Justice! Justice! Justice!" A chant rolling like thunder across concrete and glass. The sirens still spun, but no one was looking at the lights anymore. Every eye was fixed on 3 officers shrinking under the weight of exposure. Agent Carter lowered his phone, eyes steady, voice deliberate. "Effective immediately. You're relieved of this scene." The words hit harder than the chant. One officer stammered, You don't have the authority." Carter cut him off, his tone sharpened. "As a federal agent, I outrank your excuses. Internal Affairs is already en route. You will stand down." The officer with the cuffs swallowed hard, his grip loosening. The metal links slipped from his fingers and clattered against the pavement, loud enough for every microphone in the crowd to catch. A ripple of gasps followed, then cheers. The younger officer tried to speak, but his voice cracked. We were misinformed." Carter's gaze didn't move. "You weren't misinformed. You were biased. And you acted on it." The crowd erupted, clapping, shouting, phones raised higher. Someone yelled, "Say it again!" Another shouted, "That's accountability!" The older officer lifted his radio, desperate for backup. "Dispatch. This is..." Carter stepped closer, his badge gleaming under the sirens. His voice was low, but it carried. "Think carefully before you transmit another word. This frequency is monitored. Every phrase will be logged as obstruction." The officer froze, the radio lowered. His shoulders sagged under the weight of inevitability. And then, With the calm of someone who had seen this playbook before, Carter dialed a second number. "This is Agent Carter. I want tonight's footage secured from every civilian device in this plaza. Witnesses confirmed. Chain of custody begins now." The response crackled back, crisp and efficient. "Understood, Agent. Archiving initiated." Oh. Phones buzzed as notifications pinged federal servers requesting uploads, links flashing across screens. The crowd gasped, realizing in real time that their footage was now evidence. Some shouted with excitement. Others whispered in awe. The three officers? They stood paralyzed, faces pale, eyes darting, their authority dissolving into nothing. And Carter? He remained immovable, a figure carved out of resolve, his final words cutting clean through the storm. "You thought silence meant weakness. Tonight, silence was the trap." The crowd roared, and the city would not forget. The plaza had shifted. Just minutes ago, 3 officers commanded the space. Now they were stranded in it, uniforms without authority, voices without power. The officer with the cuffs bent to pick them up, but his hands shook too violently. The metal slipped, clattering again against the pavement. The crowd jeered. "Pick 'em up now, tough guy. Where's that confidence you had 5 minutes ago? Not so loud anymore, huh?" Livestream comments scrolled like wildfire. Tables turned. This is history. They messed with the wrong one. The younger officer rubbed his temple, his words crumbling. We thought we were doing our job. We didn't know." Agent Carter's eyes narrowed. "You didn't know, but you assumed. You assumed guilt before truth. And now you want forgiveness before accountability." The older officer tried to rally, his voice brittle. We'll file a report. We'll explain." Carter stepped forward, his presence swallowing the distance. "Your report won't erase tonight. Your explanation won't unwrite what these people saw, what thousands are watching live." The crowd cheered, the chant shifting. We saw it. We saw it." Then a sharp crackle from Carter's phone, clear, official, inescapable. "Agent Carter, this is Internal Affairs Liaison. 2 minutes out. Crowd control confirmed. Prepare for transfer of command." The words hit the officers like a gavel. Their eyes darted. Their shoulders sank. The younger one whispered, "They're really coming?" The older officer didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. The crowd sensed it. Their energy surged, a wave of vindication. Someone shouted, "This is what justice looks like." Another yelled, "Hold them accountable." Carter kept his gaze locked on the 3. His voice was calm, almost measured. "This isn't about me. This is about a system that thinks a black man in front of his own building is trespassing. Tonight, that system failed in public, on record, forever." Gasps and applause broke together. Phones panned across his face, steady and unflinching, then back to the 3 officers, small now, swallowed by their own mistakes. The sirens spun on, but the plaza no longer felt like theirs. It belonged to the truth that had just unfolded. And in the center, Agent Carter stood like a verdict already delivered, waiting for the final knock of justice to arrive. The crowd shifted as headlights cut across the plaza. A black SUV rolled to the curb, doors opening in one synchronized motion. Out stepped 3 plainclothes officers with lanyards swinging, the seal of Internal Affairs catching the floodlights. The chant broke into cheers. "They're here! Internal Affairs just pulled up. Get your cameras ready." The 3 officers who had once stood so tall now seemed to shrink by the second. Their badges, once shields, looked suddenly fragile, paper-thin against the tidal wave bearing down on them. The lead agent from Internal Affairs raised a hand. "Stand down. Effective immediately, this scene is under federal review." Gasps. Cheers. Phones rose higher, desperate to capture the moment. Carter didn't flinch. He simply nodded, stepping aside, his badge still visible, his presence anchoring the crowd. These officers attempted to detain a federal agent on false suspicion. Witnesses and footage confirm excessive escalation. The IA agent turned toward the 3. His tone was clipped, surgical. "Remove your weapons. Hand over your badges." The younger officer's mouth fell open. "Here? In front of them?" The answer came like steel. "Yes, right here, right now." The plaza erupted. The crowd roared approval, chants shaking the night air. "Take their badges! Take their badges!" Hands trembling, the first officer unclipped his holster, laying his firearm carefully on the hood of the patrol car. The second followed, his face pale, eyes darting anywhere but the cameras. Finally, the older officer hesitated, jaw clenched tight until the IA agent repeated, sharper this time, "Badge, now." With a shudder, he pulled it free, dropping it into the agent's waiting hand. The roar of the crowd was deafening. Phones caught every second. 3 officers, stripped of authority under the very lights they once used to intimidate. Agent Carter's voice carried above it all, not loud, but certain. Justice doesn't hide in back rooms. It stands right here where everyone can see it. The crowd cheered louder, some clapping, others chanting his name. "Carter! Carter! Carter!" The 3 officers? They stood in silence, hollowed out by the weight of consequence. Their careers ended not behind closed doors, but under the unblinking eye of the people they once policed. And for the first time that night, the balance felt restored. The night had flipped. Where once 3 uniforms owned the plaza, now they stood surrounded, stripped bare before the people they tried to control. Internal affairs agents moved quickly, professionalism sharp as steel. "Step forward," one commanded. The younger officer obeyed first, his hands trembling as the crowd jeered. Phones tracked every step. Click, flash, thousands of screenshots in seconds. "Walk of shame," someone shouted. Another voice followed. "Smile for the live stream." The second officer shuffled behind him, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the ground. Every step sounded louder than the last, echoing through a plaza now charged with vindication. Finally, the older officer. His shoulders sagged under decades of habit crumbling in a single night. He glanced once toward the crowd, maybe hoping for sympathy. None came. Instead, the chant rose again. "Accountability! Accountability!" As the 3 were guided toward the waiting SUV, Carter remained rooted, calm, unflinching. Phones swiveled back to him, narrators in living rooms across the country whispering into their screens. "Look at him, he never even raised his voice." The IA lead paused beside Carter. "Agent, we'll handle the formal proceedings from here. Your statement is logged. Your presence was decisive." Carter nodded, voice measured. "Make sure the footage stays intact. The people deserve more than rumors. They deserve receipts." The agent replied firmly, "Already secured. Chain of custody is live." The crowd roared again, some clapping, others raising fists. Livestream comments scrolled faster than anyone could read. "This is justice in real time. I can't believe I just watched this live. Respect." The 3 disgraced officers were loaded into the SUV, doors closing with finality. The sirens dimmed, their authority gone with the fading light. And still, Carter stood steady in the center of it all. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. His composure was its own declaration. Justice wasn't theater for him. It was duty. One last cheer rolled across the plaza, the sound of a community watching a wound close, if only for tonight. The SUV pulled away, its red taillights vanishing into the city night. The crowd's chants slowly faded, replaced by something quieter, an awe that settled heavy in the air. Phones were still raised, but now they weren't just recording chaos. They were recording history. Agent Carter stood alone in the center of the plaza. No cuffs on his wrists, no fear in his posture, just a man, unshaken, who had turned an accusation into accountability. A young woman near the barricade whispered loud enough for her mic to catch. "He didn't even shout once. That's power." The words rippled through the live streams, clipped into captions, repeated in comments. Carter looked out over the crowd. His voice came low, steady, every syllable carrying weight. "Tonight wasn't about me. It was about every person who's ever been told they don't belong in a place they call home. It was about silence mistaken for weakness. And it was about what happens when truth finally speaks." The plaza fell silent. Even the hum of passing cars seemed to dim. He raised the badge once more, letting it catch the light. "Remember this moment, because justice isn't what you shout in anger. Justice is what you stand for, quietly, until the whole world has to listen." The crowd erupted not in chaos this time, but in applause. Slow at first, then rolling, then thundering until the plaza shook with it. Phones shook as people tried to capture every second. Hashtags lit up timelines, number justice on camera, number Agent Carter, number silence is power. Carter slipped the badge back into his coat. He turned, walking calmly toward the glass doors of Atlas Financial Tower, the very building they tried to claim he didn't belong to. Each step echoed like punctuation to the night's verdict. At the threshold, he paused once, looking back over the sea of faces. His final words cut through the applause, sharp and unforgettable. You don't need a camera to prove you matter. You only need the truth and the courage to carry it. And then he disappeared inside, leaving the plaza filled with something stronger than anger. Respect, vindication, hope. The live streams ended, but the story had already taken root. Justice had spoken, and silence had won.